I wonder how you have coped with disappointment. All of us have experienced disappointments over the past 3 months during lockdown. Maybe it was your birthday and you couldn't have your friends and family round as was planned and you were disappointed. Or maybe you were going on holiday this summer and that's had to be cancelled. You're disappointed. Maybe you've missed seeing grandparents and being able to hug people that you love or having your friends around to play. For our Year 4 and Year 6 children, they were going to go on residentials to Woodrow and to Kingswood, but those can't go ahead because of lockdown. And for our Year 6 pupils, the end of their primary school is not what they would have hoped for, and it's not what their teachers had planned for. And it's really disappointing. It's important that we're real about these things, that we're honest and that we name our disappointments rather than just pretend that they don't matter, that they're okay. That's not true, they do matter, but they don't need to define us. What do I mean by that? I guess I'm talking about what makes me me and what makes you, the person that you are. That's more to do with the choices that we make within our current circumstances, how we find ourselves. Life is never just disappointments. You may have heard the saying, every cloud has a silver lining. Can we look for those things that we can be grateful for, even within a disappointing situation? So what are those things, the people, the places, that you've been grateful for during the last few weeks or months? These may include your parents, your teachers, special places that you've found when you've been out on walks, or skills that you've learned, or experiences that you've had. Take a minute just to think about those and to name them. Going to want to know about all of those things when you come back to school in September. So we have a choice. We always have a choice to be disappointed and dissatisfied, or to be grateful. In one of the letters that St. Paul wrote to the followers of Jesus that's in our Bible, he said, "Give thanks in all circumstances." Not necessarily for all circumstances, but definitely in all circumstances. Do you know where St. Paul was when he wrote those letters? He was in prison, literally in chains. Paul was a Roman citizen who'd spent much of his life persecuting the followers of Jesus, putting them into prison, and even having them punished. But then he had a vision of Jesus, in which Jesus spoke to him and he became one of the leaders of that church, telling people to turn back to God. Let me continue with the story about St. Paul. City after city, mile after mile, year after year, Paul travelled far and wide, facing danger every day just so that people could hear about Jesus. Was he worried? Not at all. In every city he visited, he left behind a little church, a group of people who wanted to live like Jesus. But then Paul went to Jerusalem, and that's when he ran into big trouble. The religious leaders did not like it at all when he said that Jesus was the special one that God had promised, and they became very angry, especially when he said that Jesus had come back from the dead. At last, the religious leaders arrested him and beat him. Some people even wanted to kill Paul, but in the end he was put in chains and sent to Rome to go on to trial before the emperor himself. Was Paul worried? Not at all. He knew that God had said that he would go to Rome to tell people about Jesus, and now he was on his way. He was put on a ship with other prisoners, and at first the journey went well. But then the wind changed, the ship slowed down, and by the time it reached Crete, it was running late. Was Paul worried? Not at all. He knew it wasn't a good time of year to sail, and that if the ship stayed in Crete, everything would be all right. So that's what he told the men in charge. But they didn't want to wait. Off they sailed across the choppy sea. It didn't take long before Paul's warning came true. A hurricane blew up and the boat was blown across the water like a toy. The sailors did everything that they could. They dropped the anchor, they threw the cargo into the sea, they held the battered boat together with ropes. But the storm went on and on until all the food had run out and it looked like everybody was going to die. Was Paul worried? Not at all. He knew God would keep them safe. Calmly he stood up and spoke to them all. I had a visit last night from an angel. He told me we'd get to Rome safely. The ship will be destroyed, run aground on an island, but we will all survive. And that's just what happened. The ship was wrecked off an island called Malta. At first the soldiers and sailors thought only of themselves, but Paul convinced the men in charge that the angel's promise would come true if they all stuck together. So that's what they did, and everyone was saved. The people who lived on the island took care of the castaways, and after 3 months they joined another ship and sailed to Rome. In that big city, Paul stayed in his house until the trial. So he waited and waited, but while he waited he told everybody about Jesus. Was he worried about what would happen to him? Not at all. Instead, he was busy writing letters to all the little churches that he'd set up all over the world. And in one letter he said, "Don't be worried. Just be thankful. Tell God what you need, and Jesus will give you the peace of God, and that will help you to face anything." So, let's be grateful. Let's be thankful. And that gratitude will lead us to be hopeful for what is ahead of us in the future, and we will be able to face anything. Let me end with a favourite quote of mine. For all that has been, thank you. For all that is to come, yes.